Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series finale of Blindspot. A great series finale, freaking awesome series finale. A whole bunch of waves of emotions like flowing through my body, so I'm going to be probably more all over the place than I usually am. I know that's saying a lot, but there's a lot of really interesting things that went down in this series finale, so let's break it down. The moment Jane woke up, because for one, it's interesting because this turns out, it seems like this is episode 100, which I think is so fascinating when a lot of shows end up doing that. I guess that's one of the main reasons why they did such an odd number of episodes, just to kind of have an even 100. Because it's interesting because Gotham did the same thing. I think even the 100 supposed to they totaled it out so that it will be a total of 100 episodes when it ends as well. Regardless, but the fact of the matter is, the moment Jane wakes up, I'm like, holy crap! I was like, oh, like when she's looking around, I was like, oh, she doesn't remember. I was like, no. I was like, what's gonna happen? And she's like, they're like, okay. She's like, do you remember who we are? It's like, yeah, but how? I'm like, oh, she remembers how, but it's like Patterson's like, oh yeah, I made I've been working on a zip antidote just because we've been kind of, just ever since she found out that this was going to be a thing, she's been in preparation and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, good. So now it's a situation like, oh, Jane's okay. They got all the canisters, and, Ivy might have gotten away, but they stopped the zip and everything. And so they're talking to the new director and everything, and it's like, oh yeah, you guys did exemplary work and everything. Yeah, but sadly you're not getting your jobs back. And obviously that's a blow for everyone, because Rich kept kind of thinking that it wasn't going to go this route. Everyone was kind of like, I think out of anyone, Kurt was the one that was the most hopeful about it. I think everyone else was too, but you could tell it even hit Patterson when Tasha said it. Patterson turned around and like, wait, what? It's like, it hit them all because I think Tasha was kind of prepared for it, but it still doesn't prepare you for the fact of the matter is this place that you worked at for years, because this is just following, Kurt, Tasha, and Patterson now, but obviously their history goes back further, working with at the FBI and everything. But regardless, it's like they will get immunity for everything. At the end of the day, they'll be able to start new lives, but they can never, not only can they never work with the FBI, they can never work with any other U.S. government agency either. So it's like, well, shit, what the hell, So, that's heartbreaking in its own right. So it's just kind of like them kind of having to accept that. And I love the entire episode. You have Rich being like, oh, this will be the last time you do this. You telling me to shut up. Even stopping that random guy at one point. This is going to be the last time she tells me to focus while we're trying to stop a bomb. He's like, you go, dude, you go back to work. I love that he just stopped some random dude in the office. But it is a situation of just kind of like, okay, now they're all kind of getting adjusted. What do we kind of do next? I love that conversation between Rich and Patterson. I thought was so beautiful, where he's just kind of like, the fact of the matter, he's like, I'm not gonna miss this place. She's like, I'm gonna miss it too. He's like, I know, are you completely mishearing what I'm saying? I'd say I'm totally gonna be fine and stuff like that. And it's just kind of like, she's basically, he was like, what are you gonna do? You gonna go back to Wizardville, make another billion and stuff like that? She's like, no, I'm gonna probably work on something else. But he's like, well, there's this thing connected to Isaac Newton, this machine that's supposed to make gold or whatever. She's like, I'm down. He's like, wait, what? She's like, yeah. And he's like, what was it? He was like, he was talking to that lady. He was like, the fact of the matter is, this is a prime time show that you should be watching. I'm like, I love that little referencing, hey, the Patterson and Rich show could be a show all in its own. I like that, just that little wink and nod, just being like, spin-off ideas. But nevertheless, I just thought that was kind of neat. But it turns out it's not over, because Ivy managed to get away with one canister, and obviously she's trying to work with a dude who makes a bomb, and if he makes the bomb and combines that with the canister, they get spread out. But then obviously when it comes down to it, they're trying to triangulate where she is, and there's something clicks in Jane where she's like, they're there. And it's like, how do you know? She's like, I just have this feeling. I'm like, how does she know? Because the entire episode I'm wondering, I'm like, is it because this has some connection to her with Sandstorm, back when she was Remy? Does she have some kind of connection with the Dabrazon, where it's just kind of oh, they always plan something out like this? So maybe in some shape or form, maybe they're kind of following in that same vein of things. That's why I wasn't 100% sure. I was like, how do you know some? And then as she's walking away, the director's talking, saying we can't just go flying off the seat of our pants. We need more information. And while she's doing all this, literally all the previous directors are doing it at the same time, because Jane's losing her damn mind. I'm like, what? Did she go washes her face? Lo and behold, who's she run into? None other than Roman. I was like, I was like, oh, she's dying, because she even said, she's like, am I dying? It's like, you're hallucinating, you're dying again. Because even later on, I was like, because I kept wondering, I was like, why is it hitting her so soon? Because to be fair, the original dose of Zip that was poisoning her didn't really start kicking in until season 3. So it took a while, so that's why I was like wondering. But to be fair, it's like, yeah, that was her body being flooded with it, but now she was literally steeped in a room being gassed with it from a canister, so it's a little different. So she inhaled probably a lot more. It probably like absorbed into her skin and everything. So it's, and obviously it leads to the whole conversation. I even love, like, once again, because it's episode 100, we're going all retrospective this episode. It's Affected Matters. Roman's talking about, oh, first it was, it's Ivy and the Dabrazan. Before that, it was, Madeline. Before that, it was me. Before that, it was Mom. And it was a corrupt FBI. He's almost kind of like, oh man, I don't even know. Like, he's like, it's basically so much is making my head spin. Like, I can't keep this all in order and stuff like that. Which I'm like, that has to be like a funny wink and nod, just to like all the like whiplash you'll get from like, oh, who's the bad guy? Who's the good guy? And I thought that was such an interesting element to this, because they've been building that up this entire season, where Jane was kind of always wondering about herself, just kind of in the grand scheme of things, of like, is she more of a problem than a solution a lot? Like, am I a good guy or bad guy? And obviously it's a situation of Roman being like, no one else knows what it's like to be zipped except for us. So we have to be the ones that kind of, figure this whole thing out. That was kind of interesting. But obviously for her, she was like, why am I so certain about this? It's just kind of weird. And then it turns from Roman to Oscar. I was like, you get your Oscar moment, because Kurt had one earlier this season, so for her to have one too, for him to be like, oh yeah, because you basically live in this type of world where it's just kind of like you have so many decisions that have to be made so fast, because if you don't make them fast enough, the fact of the matter is a lot of people's lives. So it's just kind of like you always kind of created this like thing to trust your instincts and your uncertainty. He's like, but at the same time, like, because it's like, certainty is kind of another word for recklessness. And he was basically saying like, oh, that's why all the people around you died. All the people you love died, including me. And she was like, I never loved you. And sad truth is, it kind of was true to that, because like Remy just he was kind of a means to an end to a certain extent for Remy, but still, that whole thing was just like interesting. She gets in the car and everything. And then like when she gets into the car, it's like literally every bad guy in the show is there. It's like Sandstorm, Crawford, Madeline. I'm like, what? This is crazy. And it's just, and it's that thing of like them being like, oh, like, this was all your plan. Jane's like, yeah, I know it was my plan, but you guys were wrong for doing what you're doing, because like the fact of the matter is it was an interesting perspective that this final episode ended up creating, where basically the whole conversation becomes like, oh, like everyone thinks that, no one's the villain of their own story. Everyone thinks they're the hero of their own story, because like, despite what we have to do, it's all for the betterment of, this country, the world, whatever the case may be, especially later on, because she's tripping and she ends up seeing Borden later on. And I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, dude, they cameoing up this episode. It's nuts, because Borden talks about the fact of the matter is everyone thinks they're just. It's like, yes, the means in which we go about it can be very harsh, but the fact of the matter is, in our mind, we believe what we do is just. Whether it be Sandstorm, he even says the government thinks the same thing. Because you want to say we're a terrorist group. What about the U.S. government, which tried to kill you with a bomb, which later bombed to kill my wife? Which kind of sent him down the route that he ended up. Because she's like, you're just lying to me. You spent like a year lying to me. He's like, no, everything I ever did was for your benefit. Granted, I did what Remy wanted me to, and that was the kind of lie to you. But everything I ever did was for you, because for him, he believed in the cause and everything. But obviously, the whole thing is hitting, Jane hard. Like circling back, like once again, she's kind of losing her mind a little bit. She gets out the car, and then all the people had disappeared. But it's just like getting because I love that, because those are all people who've never been in the same scene together. Obviously some of them, but like, Oscar, there's Home Dude, I forgot Home Dude's name. He's the dude that Jane first got in contact with, like early on in the show. He was like one of the first dudes she got in contact with from Sandstorm. I'm blanking on his name, but it's like, holy crap, you bringing him back too? It's just like I said, this is the Legion of Doom in front of us right now. That's crazy. But the fact of the matter is, she's driving, and lo and behold, who's she running to? Reed. Reed's like, yo, like, don't listen to them. Like, don't blame yourself for my death. And Reed's like, whoa. Keep eyes on the road. She's like, Reed, he's like, basically, you know what makes you a good FBI agent is the fact is your instincts kind of don't doubt them. You know, you do good, you know, so... But then she gets to the church. I love that scene. Just she bursts through the door and she sings stuff, and it's like Bill Nye is he's officiating Tasha and Patterson's wedding. He's like, hey, these two finally figured it out. Which part of my brain was like, okay, so you could read so much into that, because part of me wonders, like, was that a route they planned on going? Like, is that like, oh, this is... Because later on they make the whole argument about, like, oh, yeah, like, it could be, like, an infinite number of possibilities and stuff like that. But I'm wondering, is that supposed to be, like, a wink and nod? Because maybe the creator as well as the writers of the show might have at one point in time planned on getting Tasha and Patterson together. Maybe that could have been something. Or maybe that's supposed to be, like, a wink and nod to, like, some fanfic. I'm sure there's, like... Because obviously there's fanfic about every show and every character's being together. So there might even be stuff out there. I'd assume it's the internet. Like, if you think it most likely exists on the internet, so it's probably a thing of, like, there probably is stuff about Patterson and Zapata getting together. I mean, like I said, it could have even been something they introduced early on, but I just thought that was kind of, you know, interesting. She goes through the next door, and it's I think it was wasn't it it was David and if I'm remembering correctly, it was David and Patterson, which I think is kind of interesting. His name is David, because when I was watching the episode, I couldn't remember his name. I was like, is it Ben? I was like, no, his name is David, which is also interesting because that actor, he was in the final episode of Arrow too. I thought was kind of interesting because, like, obviously, like, his character popped up one more time because he was Ragman. So I just thought that was just kind of a neat thing of just, think about the fact that you pop up in the, like, the final episode of, like, both shows. I just thought that was kind of neat. And then he keeps walking. And then, like, you know, another one is Tasha and Reed being officiated by Keaton. Because, like, David's the one that was like, oh, this is, like, the infinite possibilities of what could be. But then Keaton was like, this could be, like, you've taken so many bumps that basically your brain is trying to give you happy endings because you're so close to dying, which is so sad too, because it's like Reed and her Tasha are getting married. You see that you see her belly and everything. And it's like, oh, it's just stuff like that. It was like, okay. And then, like, Jane came, and, you know, and to me, I feel like that's the first time they've had, like, such a long action. That was a pretty badass and lengthy action sequence. They've had them over the course of the show, obviously, but I feel like that was, like, the longest one they've ever had. I thought that was kind of interesting. And she ends up killing Thomas, and lo and behold, who walks up? Carter. I was like, dude, we're bringing out the big guns. We're doing everything. We're doing it big in this episode. I was like, hell yes, this is what I'm here for. Like, because I love it, because her, you know, losing her mind a little bit, hallucinating, presents these amazing opportunities for this final episode, kind of like to squeeze everything in. Because, for one, it's episode 100, it's the final episode, you're getting a giant retrospective, especially because this retrospective plays such a big role in Jane, making her think, like, okay, so maybe I'm not the good guy like I think I am, because, like, Carter's like, oh, like, you think we made you into the weapon. We make finely tuned weapons. You're basically napalm, and napalm isn't very direct. It just kind of blows up everywhere. So it's like, it's not just the bad guys, it's the good guys. Everyone gets destroyed by you wherever you go. And obviously, you know, Kurt and Tasha had followed her, and they're like, who are you talking to? They're like, you're hallucinating again, aren't you? So they take her back to the lab. And so basically it's because any normal person, Patterson's cure would have worked on perfectly just in the dosage in itself, but Jane is predisposed from having her entire body, her entire system flooded with zip, so that has to be kind of accounted for as well. So all they have to do is get her more and she's fine, you know. But during that, she has the whole thing with Borden, because Borden's like, the fact of the matter is, if you want to protect your present, your future, you have to you have to face your past. You have to come to terms with, rather than demonizing it, listen to it. Because once again, like, you know, everyone thinks they're just. And then, like, it clicks in her head. Like, the reason why she's so sure about what Ivy was up to is because when it was all said and done, that last episode, she had heard their plan, but the zip hitting her kind of scrambled her brain a little bit. So those memories are kind of buried deep amongst all the darkness. And then, like, everything starts dissolving, and he's like, oh, what was it like? There's greater things. Basically, that thing of like there are greater things in heaven and earth than basically your mind can imagine, or greater than philosophies and stuff like that. I don't know if that's the full traditional quote, but there are things more in heaven and earth that can be like, because I feel like I've heard that quote used differently and not using the word philosophy. Maybe like everyone's kind of taken it and kind of done their own thing with it. Regardless, Jane like is stopping the cure, but it's like if she stops it, she will die because eventually it will get worse and worse. So she doesn't take the treatment now. But for her, it's like I can't do it now because we need to stop Ivy. So I need to keep the zip in my system long enough to remember. So she runs into the elevator and she sees Naz, and it's like, oh, she's like, you were sitting here by Borden? What's this mean? She's like, your bloody nose. And then Patterson sees her and it's like, oh, so you can see her? She's like, yeah, are you okay? It's like, oh, so Naz is really here too. I'm like, because I'm trying to remember the last time Naz had popped up in the show. I want to say the last time was, the one I distinctly remember is when Shepard got arrested, wasn't that at the end of season 2, and she was there. Kind of like as she was kind of being sent to like a black site or whatever, like Nas was there. But I vaguely remember it was either season 3 or season 4. She pops up for like one episode. Again, I just don't remember what. So I'm like, dude, we're doing everything. Because you know what also clicked in my head? I was like, right, I completely forgot that her and Kurt were a thing at one point in time. I completely and utterly forgot about that until she popped up again. I was like, right, you two were a thing way back in the day too. I was like, oh God, I completely forgot about that. But I also love the metaphor of like Jane seeing the rabbit. It would have been even more befitting if it was a white rabbit. I said rabbit. Just because of the whole, I'm sure I looked at it as like, oh, is that supposed to be like an Alice? It has to be an Alice in Wonderland like reference because her name is Alice. She's following the rabbit going down the rabbit hole. I even love that whole, because even like, Roman had referred to it earlier because it's like, oh, kind of calling her by her names, you're Alice, you're Remy, you're Jane, you're the only one who can stop this. You've always been the only one who could stop all this, so she had followed the, rabbit and, it ended up ultimately, I think it was at this point, it ended up leading her to the boardroom. Once again, the Legion of Doom, and it's just kind of like she confronts them all, and I love the one dude being like, because I remember him being from, I think that's the dude from season 4 when she was Remy trying to work with any of the last members of Sandstorm. It was that dude. Also, because I also know him from Two Broke Girls. No, it wasn't Two Broke Girls. It was Mike and Molly. Right, because he, yeah. I believe so. Yeah, I think Mike and Molly. I'm just confusing the shows. Regardless, so the fact of the matter is, I thought that was just kind of neat. Him being like, "Oh, great, a lecture," but Remy's like, the fact of the matter is, you guys never got to the end. Your goals or whatever never went to the end. So it was always about the means. So it's like the fact of the matter is, they're like, "No, you listen." She's like, "No, you listen." The fact of the matter is, you want to help me, then help me. And they're like, "Well, fine. Come over here and watch." It's like she's gathered around with all her villains and stuff like that, and then like she remembers where Ivy had hidden, because they had actually figured it out that basically the bomb was manufactured in a way so that it could fit inside of a trash can. I even love that Kurt was literally the last one. It's like, oh, Naz figured it out, and then Patterson figured it out, and then Rich got it, and then Tasha got it. He's like, am I literally the only one who doesn't get it? And it's like, yeah, they were made in trash cans, so now it's a situation of like, okay, so when this is all said and done, we have to, track down the device and everything. And while Jane's there, she's literally seeing everyone, dead or alive. We see Kathy, we see Stewart. God, I'm blanking on it. Just like we see so many damn faces. I'm like, I saw Lou Diamond Phillips. I was like, right, you were in the show. I forgot you were in the show. I'm like, dude, what's going? Like I said, we are squeezing and milking every cameo that we could get in this. I love it, dude. But part of me is like, why are we getting a Mayfair cameo? We kind of get one, but it's picture-wise. But still, the fact is, Jane was able to find the bomb. It is very, serendipitous in a weird way, or rather, it's all very circle in a sense that it all started here. This is where your story began. Well, your story as Jane began all those years ago, for it to be kind of back here in Times Square. Luckily, Tasha takes down Ivy. I love that was like almost immediate, like, bam, she's done. All right, let's get to this bomb. And I love that, like, once again, the whole thing between Patterson and Rich, because he's the one that's just kind of like, oh, man, like, I'm going to miss all this and stuff like that. And I love the whole situation where like Kurt's like, oh, he's like, I'm not gonna miss this. Jane is like, actually, you are. She's like, I am too. Like, what does this say about us? And he's like, that we're awesome and cool. You know, the fact of the matter is, it's like, because at the end of the day, it's like, can you really imagine us really doing anything else? You know, that quiet and peaceful life that we kind of talked about. It's like, you know, but the fact of the matter is, you know, we'll get to that soon enough. But I love. The fact is, like, the Patterson and Rich thing, it's like, okay, cut the wire. And it's like, all right, because he was like, remember how we used to be like oil and water, but now we're in sync and stuff like that? And it's like, cut what wire? The blue wire, the green wire. Wait, why'd you say blue? He's like, what? He's like, oh, you think it's green. I was like, no, then you're right. She's like, what do you know? And he's like, no, obviously you're smarter than me. You know more about this. So she's like, but why did you say, if you say it's clearly green, then why'd you say blue? And then he's just kind of like, what's happening? Why are you, I'm on your side, why are you even saying that? And then she kind of smiles, and they both say at the same time, cut the green wire. And then it was a thing of like, at the same time, and it's like, all right, and they cut it, and it's like, yeah, they stopped the bomb and everything. So that was fantastic. And then when it's all said and done, though, it's like they go back to the office, they're getting celebrated. Yeah, you did a great job. You know, this was the last loose end that you guys needed to take care of. So you get to kind of leave. You know, it's not, I'm sure it's not the way you would want things to be. But the fact of the matter is, you know, we thank you. Because this whole thing was also, because the director had talked about it, it was like this was orders from the president, which is kind of a little, because obviously the whole thing is like, there's literally been so much corrupt shit about the FBI. It was like, we need a clean slate. That means kind of getting rid of you guys too. It's like, because they also come with a little baggage themselves. All the stuff that you were doing while you were wanted, I'm sure that's not going to look, even if you get cleared, it's still not going to look too good for the FBI. But also at the same time, let's not forget the whole thing with Jane too. So that's kind of that's a murky area. Even though it's been years, it's still, you know, a thing. But when it's all said and done, though, like, it's just this beautiful moment between Patterson, Tasha, and Rich, and they're there and everything, and it's just kind of like the sentimental moment of, like, obviously it's like, it's crazy, like, all the stuff they've been through over the years, and just kind of having to say goodbye. She's like, I could not have actually made it through I couldn't have survived this without any of you guys. And Tasha's like, me neither. And Rich is like, I think I would have been okay. And they're just laughing and joking. And it's just like, I love you guys. And Tasha being like, in some shape or form, I love you too. But then Rich kind of gets serious. He's like, I love you both as well. And it's like, you know, to their family. And they're looking at pictures of Rich and, not Rich, but Reed and Mayfair. And I was like, oh, dude. You know, beautiful send-off in that regard. And then there's like Jane and Kurt coming in being like, hey, I'm Kurt Weller, I'm the agent here. I'm like, oh, that's so sweet, because it's like the first time you met, like one of her earlier memories of like, you know, talking to you and everything. I was like, oh, that's so sweet. And the fact of the matter is, it's kind of like for her, it's like, you know, it's kind of, it's crazy for it to kind of finally be over. So it's like, you know, but then this whole conversation, well, the whole conversation about peaceful life, it's like, that's kind of not us. So like, our lives are whatever we want to make them. So let's go out and make some new memories. And Jane's like, okay. And, you know, and everyone's got their boxes, they're packed, they get in the elevator and they see like the new director, she's leading a team. It's like, it's the new them, you know, so it's like, oh man, we're down to the wire. What else is going to happen? And then it's like that beautiful scene at the end. I thought was kind of, oh, it's so great. Literally everyone. We got Boston. We got Jane's daughter. It's like, we even got Kurt's sister. I was like, holy shit, we haven't seen you in forever. You're there. Tasha's already had the baby and everything. Bill Nye is there. I love it. It's so damn good. I even love that little thing between Boston of like being like, oh yeah, like Kurt and Jane fostering all these kids is so wonderful. It's like, and then her daughter's like, yeah, probably everything, you know, my mom didn't have the greatest childhood growing up in the orphanage, stuff like that. And then Boston's like, oh yeah, and the whole thing of you being taken from her when you were a baby, and she was like, oh yeah, there's that too. I was like, I love you just awkwardly threw that in there. But also I'm like, because we haven't seen her since season 3. I kept wondering, was like, well, because they have a line in season 4 saying like she was off in college. I think she was at Brown or whatever. So it's just nice to see her one last time too. I was like, hey, okay. And just like, it almost makes me wonder, is there a thing there too where it's like, or it could just be the fact that they gotten closer, but obviously like Kurt's sisters, that's just like, oh, so there's a machine that makes go, and it's like, yeah, we're close to tracking it down. Boston and Rich kiss, but also like he's touching Patterson like that too. So that's either like a friendship thing of like, we're a team, or either they're all working together, or it could just be a thing of like part of me was like, or is that kind of like a relationship? Is it kind of like a three-way thing? Like, no judgment or anything. I was curious about that. Because, like, connection-wise, like, I always assumed that, like, Rich and Patterson were going to get together. Especially when she was talking about wanting to have a kid and stuff like that. So, like, adopting and stuff like that. And Rich was kind of there for her last season, like, about that whole conversation. That's what kind of led me to think that. But even more so, I'm like, could that be a thing? I'm totally fine if that ended up being, like, a thing of you. But it might not be. And, like I said, just throwing out random thoughts. But, like, Tasha's a PI now. Allie's there helping with the baby and everything, And then Kurt says this line I thought was kind of interesting where he was like, it's crazy. Like, after every, like, we don't, like, us being here together for him, it's like, this is crazy because the fact of the matter is there's no telling how this could have really gone. Like, cut the wrong wire at any point in time, this could have gone sideways. We wouldn't be here right now. And then Jane thinks back to the bomb and everything. I was like, what are you doing? And they show her cutting it. And then, like, her passing out, I was like, what? And then it's cutting back and forth. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And it shows that she died. I was like, what? And he's like, Jane? And she's like, no, I'm good. And she's kind of got like a half smile. And we cut to black. I'm like, I for one am like, you're an asshole for that. Once again, I say that with all the love in the world. But as a fan of the show and just in general, I'm like, that's an asshole move. You literally didn't have to inception that ending. You didn't have to make it ambiguous. You could have made it super clear cut. You could have, I want to so wholeheartedly believe that it's like, no, that the real, but that ending makes it seem more like, yeah, she did die, that this was her brain just giving her one last good memory. But I'm like, that's such an asshole thing. Or is that, but the argument could be like, no, if you, depending on how you want to look at it. Because like some people had told me, like, if you wanted to think about the 12 Monkeys ending, the series, that apparently it could be negative. But to be fair, like, I don't, like, it's been a while, so I never caught the negative aspects of like, oh, this could be seen as a sad ending. I only looked at it as like, oh, it all worked out, it's beautiful. This is clear cut being like, it could easily just be, like I said, it's Inception being like, oh, which way is it? Did Jane die? Did she live? You'll never know. Because of that, you'd assume, just because of the ending, you'd assume she kind of died. Like, I want to lean towards, like, maybe that's just her thinking, like, no, like, maybe there's some residuals of the zip or whatever. That's like a, once again, I say it with the big, most love. That's kind of a fuck you ending. That's kind of a fuck you ending of like, oh, did Jane die? Did things work out great or not? Yes, we'll just leave it up to you. I was like, don't do that. Don't do that to me. I swear you could have just, you had it set up to be like, oh, just have a happy ending. Like, no, you had to be a dick and make a possible sad ending too. Don't do that. Don't do that. Once again, I'm saying that with just kind of like, because I was literally screaming at the TV like, what the fuck was that? In the best way possible, because it was just like I'm not going to be like, oh, that just ruined it for me. It to a certain extent, to a small extent, yes, but at the same time, I'm like, I still like the ending because I'm going to go with my ending because it screws with you, because it's like, even if you say, well, my canon ending is that everything worked out, it's like they still put it out there as a possibility that not everything worked out. It's like, yes, the bomb was stopped and stuff like that, sure, but it's still just kind of like, why would you, I mean, making it so that this is a little Cowboy Bebop-ish when you actually think about it, because I think, spoilers for Cowboy Bebop, it kind of has a similar ending where it's just kind of like, did Spike live or die? I swear I remember them saying like, no, Spike died. I think I remember reading somewhere on the internet years ago of being like, oh yeah, Spike totally dies at the end of Cowboy Bebop. Once again, I'm so sorry. I said spoilers, but still, it's just, regardless. It feels kind of like that. I'm sure the internet's going to run wild with this, of like speculation of like, wait, what was that ending? What? Which is it? Is it more? I'm sure if you go back and analyze everything, and you're like, oh, obviously this shows you that the ending is this, or this, regardless. Like I said, it could have just been like, you could have just had it be perfect. It's sad that they had to like leave the FBI, but it's like, oh, their new lives, they were together, big happy family, and just like, especially because we got this nice little family get together, and you're telling me that might just be all in Jane's head. To be fair, it makes sense because they were setting that up the entire episode, being like, oh, Jane, your brain literally just wants to give you something happy to think about at the end. It's like, I don't know, man. I want to believe, because like her body just gets left out there like that. That's because, I mean, the argument could be that could be obviously symbolizing the fact of the matter is her being her being in the bag, like at the beginning of the series, like being fat. So that's what it could be, you know, that could be, you know, kind of like making that come full circle. Like she was found in a bag and she ends up in a bag. Sadly, like that's a sad metaphor. But it could just be like, oh, this could also be read as like everything is fine, but sadly Jane is a little more damaged, like her, because it took a while for her to finally get the cure. She is safe, she is good, but there's residual effects from like waiting too long. So like she might have some issues from here and there, or it could just be like a thing of her thinking like, you know, or it could just be the thing of Jane questioning herself, like, is this 100% real? Like, you know, I don't know, you know, so like I said, it's just kind of like but I guess also it's very befitting because it's like this whole show's about mysteries, and I guess maybe the argument could be one final mystery for you viewers to figure out on your own. We won't give you an answer. You'll have to find your own answer. Maybe that's what that's kind of, I mean, I think that's also kind of a metaphor in itself, you know, because the fact of the matter is Jane kind of found her answers over the course of the series, over the course of this episode. So it also, I think maybe, once again, this is coming from some idiot on the internet who's most likely reading too much into this situation. Just instead of just being like, it is what it is, like, just that's just how I am about this stuff. Regardless, say whatever you will, I still enjoy it all. I loved this because there is this bittersweetness of them. Like, once again, it's that thing of like when characters are in a show saying goodbye to like their job and all that. It's like you also know that that's the actors themselves also saying, like, because obviously it's like for them it's like them saying goodbye to a show they've been a part of for 5 years. Because even that line was kind of caught me by interest, because I was like, well, I guess also because I forgot, because like season 1 and season 2 are like back to back. They like take place a couple months apart, because I was like, there's a 2-year time, there's a 2-year time skip at the end of 2. But then I was like, to be fair, season 1 and season 2 take place like 2 months apart from each other. So that's what I kind of got caught up in the semantics of it. So like I said, ignore me. But the fact of the matter is, you know, the whole, like, saying goodbye, like, the entire time my heart was hurting, because I'm like, it is kind of crazy to say goodbye, like, because I never want anything to end. It's something I say literally all the time, but, you know, I still walked away from this being, I think this is a very satisfying ending. Like I said, it's a complicated thing because of the ending, but in general, it was a great episode. It was fun, which is interesting to say fun about this show that, you know, deals with them tackling, going after bad guys and stuff like that, you know. There's also like, I could get into that, but I'm not going to. I'll leave that for another time. The fact that regardless, I've loved this show. I'm glad to have been on this ride since the beginning. Like I said, it is sad to see this come to an end, but I really appreciate the show. You know, to the creators, to the writers, to the cast, like, I thank you for making an amazing show. Thank you for taking us on this amazing ride. The laughs, the tears, the surprises. God, I even forgot about that. I just thought about it, like Roman and Crawford's daughter. Oh yeah, the whole thing of like, oh yeah, sorry for lying. Sorry, I killed you. And it's like, oh, it's all in the past. And it's like, I forgot they were also one of the couples. I'm sorry. Regardless, to everyone associated, you know, from cast to crew, I wish everyone associated with this show the best in their future endeavors, you know. So once again, you get to that point of all these reviews where it's just kind of like, I have to say goodbye. I have to stop talking, you know. So, and it's just, that's when it really hits me, especially when I'm going to upload this. It always hits me with series finales when I start uploading, like, yeah, this is officially goodbye to the show for me, you know. So, yeah, if you are curious, like, you want to watch the whole show, obviously you can find it in digital, but the entire show is also on Hulu. Like, by the time this goes up, the entire show should be on Hulu, because, like, the final episode gets up, going to be up on Hulu, like, 5 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. So, if you're ever curious about, like, hey, just rewatching the entire show, you can find the entire show on Hulu for now. So, like I said, also digital stuff like that. Regardless, I'm going to shut up. But till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.